To consider politics as the prerogative of only men would be a fallacious assumption today, because in any situation of conflict or collaboration, not only men but overwhelmingly women and children are affected by the outcome of such liaisons. Thus, it is only desirable that women should not only participate more proactively in political matters, but also take an interest in the international events happening around them. In this context, Cynthia Enlow's book, Bananas, Beaches and Bases, explores the effect that international politics has on women. What she has shown is that women are not only victims of war crimes or international politics, but also active members. She has looked at plantation workers, diplomatic wives, and sex workers in military bases. What she has tried to explore is the fact that when men are forced to look at international relations from the perspective of women, they are made to understand what international politics should be and what it is for the entire humanity. In this context, another article entitled Sex and Death in the Rational World of Defense Intellectuals, Carol Cohn has shown that the highly masculinized world of militarism has led to the unfortunate separation of war from human suffering. Especially in the post-Cold War era, it is important to make women participate in all policy matters to ensure a fair deal for all quarters of humanity, especially in areas of refugee problems, nutrition, strife, ecological problems. Women can actually put positive effect on making policies which would go a long way in ensuring equality for all humanity. Because they are victims of dual domination, women are in a better position to offer solutions to the problems that plague the post-Cold War world. They are not only concerned about strifes, terrorism problems, refugee problems, nutrition problems, or ecological problems. They can also make positive changes in the society, polity, economy, and culture of the post-Cold War world. Changes became visible from the 1980s. Around 10 years later, in the 1990s, the situation changed so much that it became possible to gender international relations and politics. It was now possible to include women in policy-making communities like the World Bank or the United Nations. Also, international relations was gendered not only theoretically but also practically, whereby the problems that were plaguing the world post the Cold War was seen as gendered and not as neutral. It was felt that the women's perspective was important to rectify the historically contingent inequality that existed within society, within the political setup, and within these international organizations. Women are generally motivated by emancipatory goals. They try and examine their own lives within their state and the international scenario in order to find solution to their problems. As a result, women often try to find a solution to their problems within the experience of individuals who have always been on the margins of the society and had nothing to do with international politics. Thereby, they examine their lives bottom up and not top down, ensuring that if a change occurs, it would be all-pervading. As a result, women often can draw from day-to-day life experiences to actually situate themselves within the state and the international arena, and thus address not only their individual problems or community problems, but that of women as a worldwide community as well. Women are aware of the effect that international politics or state politics has on them as a different gender. Therefore, they are more keen to change the scenario because they feel that the state structure which has continued so far has been masculine and has supported the patriarchal hierarchy. Feminists are increasingly realizing that this gendered idea of politics is being perpetuated and distorted in such a manner that the control that men have over their wives or their female family members, their children, and other men down in the hierarchy is being shown as natural. This inequality that results is what they feel leads to strife. Thus, they are trying to challenge the traditional concept of male and female, because if they have to ensure world peace or a situation where growth and prosperity can be sustained, this inequality will have to be mitigated. In a sense, we can say that international politics itself is extremely gendered, whereby men decide to wage wars, decide to go to wars, decide to initiate peace. It is as if women do not participate in any manner, that they remain at the periphery. Women definitely are acknowledged as victims of war crimes or war violence. But at the same time, women as participants of war preparation is something that is not recognized by the world male leaders. Thus, the objective is to reach a situation whereby a critical understanding of gender inequalities is possible, so as to ensure a more equal world as mentioned earlier. It is often observed that because women have more experience in nurturing and also handling human emotions and relations, they make better peace negotiators. But unfortunately, we haven't seen many women in the world bodies like the UN or the World Bank as policymakers or as people who initiate peace processes. This inequality has been actively resisted by feminists all over the world. It is felt that in case of any strife, women are victims as mentioned, but that women can also bring about change. As a result, the UN has now become more gender sensitive, and the participation of women has increased given the UN women's body which was constituted for this purpose. For example, women in the post-Cold War era refused to consider war as a discrete event. They tried to explain that war was a process which was contained within their own society. They said that the preparation for war, going into war, and the after effects of war was something that was felt more by women and children than by men. And thus, they tried actively to ensure that war did not break out in the post-Cold War era. Why is gender important here? Gender is important because to understand the entire range of international politics, it is not enough to look at only the male perspective. The female perspective as entities who experience violence different from men is important. Keeping that in mind, we have to realize that war itself is a gendered notion. And that is why it is important to ensure women as active participants in not only the UN but also the Security Council. Also, with the end of the Cold War, new vistas opened up to examine international relations. It was no longer necessary to look at everything from the militaristic point of view. What was now important was ecological concerns, environmental concerns, nutrition concerns, refugee concerns, as well as mortality rate concerns. All of these have been contained within the superstructure of gender, which has made it possible for intellectuals and leaders to look at these issues in a nuanced manner. For example, in 1995, the US Immigration and Naturalization Service issued new guidelines for women seeking asylum in the US. This was done keeping in mind that women experience violence differently from men. This was done keeping in mind women fleeing from gender oppression like genital mutilation, domestic violence, or rape and such other abuse. Thus, the world is now waking up to gender issues and becoming more sensitive to the needs of both the genders. The basic premises from which women participate in post-Cold War politics and society is the assumption that the state is based on patriarchal division of labor, where women are made subordinates and their labor is not given enough importance. In fact, to quote Kathleen Stodd, women had little or no hand in the process of state formation and consolidation, yet male control over women was central to laws and policies that govern the gender realm. Thus, we can see that a state which functions basing itself on a patriarchal setup has to be made sensitive to the needs of the women population. And this has been the basic premises of post-Cold War politics for women so long. Also, women are now seen as active participants in the international arena because their roles are being redefined nearly on a daily basis. They are not only confined within their private space, giving their services, but also move out into the public space where they voice their opinion to make their needs be felt and changes initiated. As a result, what is visible is the fact that, in spite of remaining hyper-masculine as far as the superstructure is concerned, these institutions are admitting more and more women, whereby certain norms and practices have changed and become more gender sensitive. That is to say that what was earlier considered as feminine is now accepted. Also, the discourses that follow now are more free from gender biases. This is an important change because it means that men are now waking up to the fact that the patriarchal setup is not only affecting women in a negative manner, but men also, because they are forced to conform to a particular idea and a particular behavior which may or may not be conducive to their nature. What we can say is that there is not equal representation of men and women in these policy-making bodies. But what is definitely visible is the increasing number of women who are now acknowledged as world leaders. For example, in 1985, the number of women-led ministries in the world was only 3.4%. This increased to nearly 7% in 1995. We have seen this change and we are acknowledging it as a positive change. Another important area where women are making their impact felt is the non-governmental organizations. Women as NGO workers can move from one country to another, ensuring relief work where it is required, and also making the people conscious of the issues that they have been ignorant about so far. In this manner, public ideas and public consent can be raised regarding, say, nutrition problems or refugee problems or ecological problems as mentioned earlier. The NGOs have become an important platform for women to not only make their presence felt but also to contribute positively to changes which would go a long way in ensuring equality for everybody. If we go back to the Cold War era, we realize that the times then were definitely male-centric. World domination was considered as the male bastion. What was more important for world leaders was military action or preparation for military action. What we cannot deny is the fact that this very idea of world domination, of military action, is definitely male-centric. At the same time, we also cannot deny the fact that a lot could be gained from the knowledge and the experience of women as participants of a society. What happened in the Cold War era was that though women were important cogs in the machinery of the state, neither their experience nor their suffering was given any importance. Thankfully, this has changed after the Cold War era. But what is important for us to understand is to what extent has that change really made an impact on our lives. For this, we are going to look at a single situation that arose in Mali. In Mali, women were the main targets for the extremist groups that had overtaken the northern part of the city. As a result, women were not only harassed, but they were made to resign from all public services. They were asked to stay indoors and not venture out. The men, on the other hand, either had to flee their homes or were forcibly recruited within these terrorist organizations. The women were now left alone, not only to head their families, but also fend for everybody, without any help from outside. What was worse was that they had no access to food and water. So what could women do in this situation? To begin with, they made a demand to be included within the peace talks that were going on at that time. They also raised their voices, mobilized public opinion, and made the UN aware of their situation. In response, UN women began convening big meetings all across the country. Women were also asked to express their opinion as to the method in which they wanted peace restored and how they wanted to be a participant in this entire process. What is interesting here to note is the fact that UN women arranged to fly 4 women peace leaders to fly to the peace talks, enter uninvited, and raise an alarm against the atrocities that were committed by the terrorist groups on women and girls. This forced the peace talks to include women as negotiators as well as policy makers. As a result, the UN Security Council passed out a definite resolution whereby women's rights were defined in a manner which would make it possible for them to safeguard their rights. Only when women became participants in the peace talks was crime against women listed as a war crime. So far, crime against women was not listed as a war crime, and therefore the victims never received any justice. This is a positive change that we have seen happening because women have been brought to the negotiation tables. In fact, to quote Phumzile Mambo Nuga, the UN Women Executive Director, who said that when war erupts, women are often the first to experience the harsh brutality and the last to be called to the peace table. She was right in defining what war meant to women. Because of our efforts, the UN Security Council also passed resolutions whereby women can participate in conflict resolution and recovery in a more forceful manner. To sum up, we can say that the world today is recognizing the fact that gender oppression, much like poverty, is an injustice which can create an imbalance in the world peace process. In order to maintain a sustainable peace process, it is important to do away with these inequalities, and this can only happen when more and more women are made to participate in the policy-making process. This will not be enough, because we also have to be aware of the fact that only allowing women to come to the negotiation table is not enough. It is more important for the change to start from within the private space, whereby girls as children are trained and made to recognize their rights, their sources of oppression, and also the ways to overcome these. Girls have to receive education. They have to be made independent as well as active members of the civil society, where their contribution is not considered as unimportant. Also, we have to remember that it is not important to contain this idea only within the theoretical framework of political science or international relations. The idea of gender inequality has to be brought out into the area of action, whereby we realize that women can make a positive change in society, polity, economy, and culture of any state if they are allowed to participate in a more active manner. For example, as far as power is concerned, men see it as domination, whereas women see it as enablement. Thus, it is important to make this idea not just gender specific, but something that society accepts as a whole. In this vein, we will talk next about how women's participation has brought positive changes in the post-Cold War era society, polity, economy, and culture.